Hi everyone, welcome to Cloud Rangers Microsoft Azure training. I am Sean Ismail, a Microsoft Azure MVP, and that's my contact information right below over there, my email, Twitter, blog, YouTube, as well as the slides, the slideshare.net where the slide of this session will be posted. So today I want to talk about Azure Recovery Services, and this is the part one, which is going to cover Azure Backup. So a couple of things happened when I was planning to do this session. So the very first thing was I was looking at the MOC, the Microsoft official curriculum for 7533, and I was trying to recall, or what kind of stuff did I study for my exam. At the same time, I was looking at the new curriculum out right now and seeing how much of it is now covered. It seems like it's still very basic. I mean, this is actually part of Azure storage, believe it or not. But I thought that what I'm going to do is I'm going to make separate sessions for recovery services or backups and things as such, and not make it part of data storage. The reason behind that is that I believe that this section requires a lot more attention than what is going to be covered as part of the 533 exam. It might be a good news for some of you who's planning to look at these videos and figure out how Azure Backup, site recovery, I mean, in general, the recovery services offerings from Azure is. And then you have people who are just trying to do this for watch these videos for exams. They might not be super interested in all the details, but just concentrating on writing their exams. But I think the former is better. The more information I have here is going to help you definitely better succeed in your work, or if you are just doing a POC or just looking into how Azure Backup works. And definitely all of this will be helpful for your exams as well. So this is going to be a bunch of sessions together for the recovery services, and I'll tell you some details why when we proceed with the slides here. But I'm hoping that by the time the sessions are done, you'll have a good grasp on most of this recovery services stuff. Okay, there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to rush through some of the concepts in the beginning. I'm trying to have a demo at the end of this session. I mean, towards the end of this session, so you get some value for doing hands-on stuff as well. All right, so let's get started. What we are going to do today is the Azure Backup. These are all part of recovery services, as you will see. So in introduction, what I want to say is that Azure Recovery Services usually has two components to it. One is Azure Backup, what we are going to do today, and Azure Site Recovery, which will be a separate session, okay? So this used to be called Azure Recovery Services, but now this is part of the Microsoft Operations Management Suite, OMS, Azure OMS, if you have not already heard of it, please look into it. So what OMS has is that OMS has log analytics, it has IT automation, it has security and compliancy, and it also has this Azure Recovery Services or Azure Recover or Azure Site Recovery as part of its offering right now. The functionality, how you work with it, what it does, it's still all the same. It makes no difference. Doesn't matter which umbrella Microsoft puts this under. You still go to the Azure portal and you do everything from there, as you will see. So what is Azure Backup? Azure Backup is the service that can be used to back up and restore data in Microsoft Cloud. I mean, every time I read that, it kind of makes me giggle a little bit because I'm thinking that that's such a simplistic thing to say. But in reality, that's exactly what it is. It's just a backup service from Azure to back up and restore data in Microsoft Cloud. And what Azure Backup does is it integrates or replaces your current on-premises backup solution. So when people think of backing up to the cloud, usually what they do is they think of their on-premises system or whatever their current backup system is to back up data in the cloud, right? But Azure Backup is a little bit more than that. So it can enhance, obviously, your current backup solution, or this can be a complete backup solution that can replace your current backup solution, depending on your needs, of course. As you'll see, it's a little bit more powerful than just storage. And one great thing about Azure Backup is that it fulfills the requirement for offsite backups. So you recall that every time in the on-premises when you have backups, let's say if it's on tapes or disks or whatever, there is requirement or there should be requirements of taking that backups and storing it off-site. So if there's a disaster somewhere or any unfortunate event, you have your backups off-site from where it's a different physical location where you can take that backups from there and restore it in another environment, the whole DR or disaster recovery scenario, correct? So with Azure Backup, by default, you are taking all your data and backing up in Azure Data Center or data centers, and that already takes care of offsite backups, which is great. So the next thing that comes in is that what is the benefits of Azure Backup? I know you probably have Commvault or Microsoft's, own backup solution in place somewhere, like System Center, data protection, or you have, I don't know, Veritas or Semantics solution or IBM. You might have your own on-premises or even some sort of cloud integrated backup solution in your environment already. So why would you look at Azure Backup rather than doing all of that? So traditionally, what has happened is most of these backup solutions do integrate with some cloud solution, or they're beginning to do so. But they treat the cloud as an endpoint. So let's say you are on your backup solution, you'd find that either you can back up to a disk or you can back up to tapes. Or recently, they started having solutions where you can say, hey, I want this backup data to be stored somewhere in some cloud, right? So that's still your traditional backup system that will offer cloud as an endpoint or the media where things are stored. With Azure Backup, that changes completely. So these are some of the benefits of having, an Azure Backup solution, which is an automatic storage model management. So you can have a pay-as-you-go model for storage, where you don't have to worry about tapes or hard drives or any other form of media. You can basically just have the storage you have from Azure. Okay, and which means that there is the cloud's unlimited scaling option, that you can scale this so much more than just what you have your system on premises. It has multiple storage options, so you can have a locally or geo-replicated solution for storage. This is no different from all the storage solutions we have talked about in the past sessions. So what happens here is that you are basically taking advantage of whatever cloud advantages are in Microsoft Azure, right? You have unlimited data transfer. This is a question I'm asked quite a bit. How is the whole data transfer to Azure, billed or charged? Because it does matter for people to back up like gigabytes of data or even sometimes terabytes of data. And as we know that in Azure for the storage as well as the data transfer, there is a charge, right? But this is the good thing about Azure Backup. When you are doing backups through Azure Backup, the data inbound is free. So all the backups that you're sending to Azure is going to be free. The data outbound, which is always tricky from Azure because that's something always Azure charges, is also free. But there's a little catch here. The data outbound for restore is free. So if you're restoring data, that means you are getting your data back for only restoration purposes, it will be for free. But if you're going to take that data, copy it, and move it, or do anything else with that, it's going to have the regular, data outbound charges. But for me, this makes a lot of sense, and this is absolutely considered almost free for data transfers because inbound is free, and most of the times when I want the data back, it will probably be a restore job. I'll get that for free as well, which is amazing. The other thing that a lot of people do not have but should have, given the entire circumstances around revolving around data protection and encryption, is that by default the data in transition means when you're transferring data to Azure or you're restoring data from Azure, it's AES 256 protected, means your data is going to be encrypted. And data at rest, which is basically the stored data, means when you have the data stored on a tape, that's your data at rest, or a drive, it's a data at rest. So when data is at rest in Azure, which is in Azure Vault, and I'll explain that in a bit, it's all encrypted. So end to end, the data transfer as well as the storage is encrypted. And this will work out for you guys who are curious about compliancy. This will actually work out for having your data um, transfer as well as stored uh, in encrypted and in the Azure Vault. So that's one thing you can check off. And there is a long-term retention. Azure will allow you to retain your data in Azure Vault for different time frames, and it goes up to 99 years or something like that, the time of this recording, so which is pretty cool as well. So let's get into Azure Backup components and get into some details. Like I said, there's a lot to cover before we can actually jump in, but this you'll start appreciating this content over here that I'm going through, because eventually this will kick in to understand everything else. So Azure Backup Components, there are quite a bit of components over here, but I want to say that at the end of the day, when you're protecting a system, let that be a Windows or Linux system, let that be files or folders or volumes or entire virtual machines or physical servers, end of the day, you need some sort of agent to go collect that data or send that data to Azure Backup System for you. And that's exactly what's going on over here. As you can see, if I can get my pointer, this is all the kind of workloads that Azure Backup will actually back up for you. So it can be an Azure virtual machine, it can be a physical server workstation, it can be a Hyper-V virtual machine or a VMware virtual machine. So one thing you'll notice right away that when we say Azure Backup, this has nothing to do with just Azure virtual machines or data. You can actually use Azure Backup to do stuff on premises, including your physical servers. So this turns out to be something like what I mentioned earlier, a complete replacement of your backup systems, right? So don't think that just because it's called Azure Backup, it's only going to take care of your Azure workloads. As you can see from this diagram, that it can go to all the way to a physical server, it can go to your Hyper-V virtual machines or VMware virtual machines, or even, yeah, it can do Azure virtual machines as well. But Azure Backup does pretty much everything and a bit more than your current solution. What are the things that it can back up? It can back up folders, files. It can even back up some application-aware things like Exchange, SharePoint, as well as SQL Server. And they can be located anywhere. And through the backup component, it takes all this data and it puts it in the Azure Backup Vault. So Vault is basically where your all the data gets stored, right? So let's talk a little bit about the agents. So to start off with, you have the Azure Backup agent, which is called the Mars agent, Microsoft Azure Recovery Services agent, I suppose. So it's called the Azure Backup Mars agent. This is the primary agent, and I'll show you the demonstration today with this agent as well. Or it could be the System-Centered Data Protection Manager, or the DPM's agent. So if you already have a Microsoft System-Centered Data Protection Manager on premises today, you can use that agent to actually hook up with Azure Backup as well. There's something called as Azure Backup Server. I'll definitely go over this on one of the sessions, but Microsoft actually has its own backup server solution that you can install, and it can do the backups for you. And then you have Azure Backup through a virtual machine extension. And the last one is purely for Azure virtual machines, both Microsoft Windows as well as Linux, where this extension can go and do the backups for you. So we'll be limited to this kind of 4 agent services over here to back up our data, and this should cover most of the scenarios. Okay, so now that we have a little bit of an idea about the components over here and how the agents work, I want to go deep dive a little bit into the Azure Backup Vault and give it some love so you can understand what it is, because this happens to be the primary place, the backup vault, where your data is stored. So the way this works is that think of Azure Backup Vault as a virtual container, a virtual destination for backups, let's say. So as target, when you are on premises and your target goes to tapes or it goes to other drives or file folder locations where you store all the backup data, in backup vault, I mean in Azure Backup scenario, Backup Vault is that destination, which is in the cloud, it's Azure storage. And in Backup Vault, obviously the backups as well as the backup configurations, that how this backup is being backed up is stored. So that all information stays in the Backup Vault for you. There are some resiliency options. So when you create a backup vault, you need to tell the backup vault that, hey, are you going to just have the data stored in one data center, or it's going to be geo-redundant? So this is already great than your on-premises solution, because you are saying the backup vault, perhaps by geo-redundancy, you can store my backup in multiple locations. So in case something happens, I still have my backup somewhere else. And this is already great regarding offsite. Well, Azure Backup Vault already is offsite, but now you have an offsite to your offsite backup with multiple replication or replicated data somewhere in case there's some sort of an issue with one of the uh, data centers where the backup vault is located, on Microsoft Azure. So what happens is anytime you have a system where you have an agent that needs to be installed, or how it has to communicate with the backup vault is through a it has to be registered. So basically you go and tell, let's say this virtual machine, that register yourself with this backup vault, right? Because you can have multiple backup vaults in one subscription, or it could be a backup vault in a different subscription, but you need to register that. And the way you do that is having a vault credential file. So there is basically a private key in a certificate that's created for you from the portal when you create the backup vault. And what happens is that every time you need to go get the credentials for the backup vault, you can just generate it and you can have it expires after a certain time. And I'll go over all of that. But with this vault credential file, when you're installing this agent, you got to tell this agent where to go. And you can do that with the vault credential file, and it will find out where to go and how to put the data in there. Just a couple of housekeeping tasks here. Azure subscription can have up to 25 vaults. So Azure thinks that 25 is quite a bit. I mean, most of us can probably do away with, I don't know, one or two vaults or a little bit more, but you have multiple, you have many hundreds of servers. I'll show you why you might need more than one vault, but 24 vaults is quite a bit per subscription, which is great. So now, and this is 2016, Microsoft does not have any limitations on the limit of data you can store in the vault. So as far as data is concerned, there's no limitations there. But there are some other limitations I'll talk about later. But you can, for now, store as much data you want in one of these vaults. So pretty much all the data you can think of, you can actually put it in the vault, which is pretty great because now you're not thinking of running out of tapes, running out of disk drives where you're storing the data. You can put all in there. But I'll come to the constraints and restrictions in a bit. But this is great so far. So let's talk a little about, and I totally took this from Microsoft shamelessly, but I'll tell you what's going on over here. What are the kind of workloads and we talked about multiple agents, if you recall over here, which agent is required at which scenario. I think that would be the most helpful for you to get your head across this as your backup, saying that, hey, you mentioned about 4 or 5 different options or agents. When do I need what? That's exactly what the next slide will address. So these are the different features or different workloads that Microsoft Azure Backup can backup for you. And these are the different agents or the 4 agents we talked about in the last slide and what scenarios they will cover. So let's take a look at this for a moment. You know, as you look at these agents over here, since I mentioned Azure Backup will work both for on-premises as well as obviously at the Azure solutions, you can see that you might require multiple agents or, there are all these agents for different scenarios, right? So let's say Azure Backup Agent. It's only for Windows Server machines and it's for files and folders. You can obviously see that the Azure Backup Agent is not going to work for something like, let's say, Linux, right? And this is only for files and folders. These files and folders can be, I don't know, it can be on premises, it can be on physical server, it can be on a virtual machine, or it can be on Azure virtual machine. This is just a file and folder level. So this will actually cover most of the scenarios. And this one is for Windows client machines, files and folders, right? So this this too will be solved by Azure Backup Agent. But obviously you can see the Azure Backup Agent cannot do anything with your Hyper-V virtual machines, both for Windows or Linux, or even the applications, SQL, SharePoint Exchange. Um, it cannot do an entire backup of Azure virtual machines or Azure Virtual Machine Linux. And when I say Azure Virtual Machines, this is the entire virtual machine, not the content in there, like files and folders. You can still go to an Azure Virtual Machine and back up a folder with the Azure Backup Agent. So that's pretty cool. Then System Center Data Protection. So DPM, this is an on-premise solution. If you have a DPM in place, as you can see that it can do all of this right over here, Windows machines, folders, and everything else over here. And we know that already. Azure Backup Server will do the backup server agent will do all of this as well. And the only way you can actually do a Azure virtual machine or an Azure entire Linux backup is through the VM extension in Azure Backup, which will do the entire thing over here. So this will give you an idea of how these agents can actually work together to um, to all the workloads or what are the scenarios that you can actually cover through having these agents deployed. In a real scenario, you'll probably use one or more combination of this, right? I mean, if you don't have DPM, then you don't have to worry about all of this. Then there's other way to cover all that. So if you don't have a DPM, you can obviously do, let's say, Hyper-V Virtual Machine or things like Microsoft Exchange, SharePoint through Azure Backup Server. So what I'm trying to get over here, let's say if you want to really do nothing but Azure for your backup solution, you can actually, well, you just need the Azure Backup Server and you need the Azure Backup Agent and the VM extension, which are pretty much straightforward to actually do everything. So let's say this is your DPM, or this is your Commvault, or this is your IBM Stivoli, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can get away with just using Azure solution to do your entire backup. That's what I see from this matrix, and that's what I want you to take away from this slide over here. That Azure Backup Solution can either complement or pretty much take over your current solution. So the other thing, and this is again from Microsoft, I took this from their webpage, is that the kind of support that you have through all this information over here, right? I mean, these agents. So your Azure Backup Agent will be able to do all storing of all data in Backup Vault. It basically says that I do not need anything else because I can store everything in the vault. It will compress data in the backup vault, so it will try to reduce the size of your backups. It can obviously do incremental backup. No disk deduplication. Azure Backup Agent will not be able to store it in your tape storage or disk storage, as you can see, because that's not what it's meant for, right? Now, with your System Center DPM, you can do all of this, right? I mean, you can use the System Center DPM to actually tell it that, hey, rather than storing everything on premises or on tape, I want you to go and store that in Azure Backup Vault. So this is a hybrid scenario based on your current solution. I'm not too sure if companies like Commvault or, IBM, they're still doing it, but I know that they all got into this in hybrid scenario where the current agent with a software update or whatever should be able to take your on-premise data and store it in the Azure Backup Vault, which is great. I mean, this is the typical cloud storage endpoint, right? Your backup vault, that rather than storing it on premises somewhere, I'm going to send it to the backup or store it in cloud. You can do that as well. I mean, I think that's a pretty decent solution. Obviously, your on-premise solution can do disk storage, tape storage. It can do your compression in the backup vault, incremental backup, and some deduplication. I mean, I know Commvault will do deduplication for you. DPM has partial disk deduplication support in Azure, but not completely. And then you have Azure Backup Server. So Azure Backup Server will do the same thing as your on-premises, except that it's not going to do any tape storage for you. Because Azure is not going that route. They're thinking that we don't need tape storage. Even if we do the backup server, it's much cheaper, much easier to manage. It's very highly scalable and highly available to put everything in the backup vault, right? And you should probably, unless you really have a requirement, get away from the tape storage. So unless it's a traditional backup solution, you're not going to get the tape storage anywhere in this matrix, right? But then again, just to notice over here is that Azure Backup Server will do pretty much everything your on-premises does. Okay, and the other thing is the Azure Backup VM extension. We know that it will store it to Backup Vault, and it will also do incremental backup for you. It's not going to do much compression, and you will see the reason because of this is that Azure Backup VM extension only stores the entire virtual machine. It'll back up your entire virtual machine for you, and there are some issues in compression, so it's not going to do that for you. But I think these are the two main, the previous one over here and this one over here, gives you an overview of what these components can do, as well as the capabilities you have in your hands when you use Azure Backup. So these are pretty important. Okay, now before I dive into the demo, I'm trying to rush a little bit with the slides today because there is so much to cover. Um, there are some benefits of using the Azure Backup Agent. I'm not going to go through the other agents, their benefits and advantages and disadvantages, because in today's demo, I will only have time to show you the Azure Backup through this agent for files and folders. Okay, so bear with me a little bit here, and I want to tell you what are the advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages are here are with the positive plus signs, and the disadvantages here are with the negative. So the first advantage is that You can use a backup agent to back up files and folders on Windows machines. Let that be physical or virtual. So do not think that just because you have an Azure backup agent, you cannot deploy this from the cloud to your on premises. You can deploy this anywhere. It could be your physical machine, it could be your Hyper-V, VMware, whatever solution you have, or it can be an Azure virtual machine. It will be able to back up your files and folders from anywhere, right? There's no backup server required. This is a solution right out of Azure portal, so you'll notice that it will not require any installation of any backup server anywhere. It's just an agent that gets deployed. And it will use the Azure Backup Vault as the endpoint, or it will use the endpoint or the storage for all these backups, okay? The disadvantages with Azure Backup Agent is, well, one thing is that it will only be able to back up or restore 3 times a day. So you can actually go and say, hey, I want to back up this folder. So you'll be only able to back up that folder 3 times in a day. So let's say you're doing it one at 6 a.m. You might be able to do another, let's say at 11 a.m. and the one at 3 p.m. or something like that. But after the third time, it's not going to back it up anymore. So you have to now find the use case for this. I mean, there are a lot of use cases for this. I mean, you can back up your file shares, you can back up logs or data that you don't need to back up more than 3 times a day or more than 1 or 2 times, right? And you can do a full file level restore also only 3 times a day. More than that, you can't. There are definitely usage scenarios for this. For most cases, this is okay with some people, but if you think that you need something like a backup of this folder every hour, well, this agent is not the way to go. You probably need to install the Azure Backup Server, which will actually allow you more. It will allow you more to back up than these intervals, right? So this is a very basic case scenario. The other thing is that it can only do a file, folder, or volume level restore. It's not going to do any application level. Let's say Exchange mailbox got deleted. You won't be able to go and be like, restore my Exchange mailbox, or my SQL database got deleted. Or some data got corrupted. Let's restore the entire database. No, it's not going to do that. It's only going to do file, folder, and volume level. And this obviously has its place, and that obviously has its own place. Azure Backup needs Azure Backup Server to do application aware stuff like for Exchange, for SQL, for SharePoint, for things like that. And obviously, one most important thing, Azure is doing a lot with Linux, but they're not there yet. So while recording this video right now, the backup agent does not have support for doing a file folder or volume level backup or restoration for Linux. So basically, there's no support for Linux from the Azure Backup Agent. Alrighty, so let's leave all the theoretical concepts at this level. I don't want to go any deeper because then we won't have time for the demo. So I'm going to get into my subscription right now and give you guys a demo of what we were talking about and how to do a real life backup actually from one of my on-premise virtual machines which is running on Hyper-V. So let's go to the subscription here real quick. All right, so I am logged into my subscription over here. As you can see, there's no resource groups. There's nothing going on in here. I don't have anything created. So the first thing you need to do and this browser is acting up a little bit. Okay, so the first thing you need to do to get started with backups is to actually have an Azure subscription, obviously, and then you need to create a recovery services vault. Um, if you don't see the recovery services vault over here, I actually have this thing organized and created the way I want it, or the things I access most. And the way you do that, yours might look a little different. One is you can obviously go to new over here and you can search for, I don't know, recovery service vault or Azure site recovery over here, backup and site recovery. Uh, where's the vault? Let's see if I type vault. Key vault. Nope, not getting it from there. Let's go to hybrid integration and you should see, nope, not seeing it over here as well. So backup and site recovery, OMS, you can obviously pick that up from here. That's actually the marketplace. Let's do this. Browse here. And in Browse, you should see all the services that are provided from Azure, and you should see Recovery Services Vault over here. Recovery Services Vault. So the way you can customize this, if you do not know yet, you can actually, you see the little golden stars over here. Whatever you put the golden star on over here, let's say if I want VM images or virtual networks over here, I'll just click on this one and it shows up here. If you want to remove everything, you just click on this one. So whatever functions or whatever features that you use quite often, you can actually add or remove from here. If you didn't know that, this is a little nifty trick that helps quite a bit. And it's easy for me to sometimes look for services rather than searching from new or over here. Like you saw just now, it was hard for me to find that. You can come over here and see all the services that are offered, right? And I came over here, I went to the Recovery Services Vault, or I just added it here. And let's go to the Recovery Services Vault to get started. As you can see, I do not have any service vaults yet or recovery vaults here. So we'll go and add one. It's very simple. All you need to do is give it a name. Let's say I'll call it Ranger Vault 1. So every subscription can have up to 24. Let's say this is my first vault. Choose your subscription. Create a new resource group. I do not have any resource group over here. Everything is in Resource Manager deployment model. So you need to have a resource group. I'll call it Ranger Resource Group 001. And for locations, you can go ahead and put whatever you have right now. I'm going to just use East US 2. Okay. Let's see this. Oh, by the way, before I move from here, these names, some of these names sometimes are unique. So I noticed that a lot of people who are watching my videos and trying to do the labs while they watch this video, which is a great way to learn, by the way, and I think all of you should do that. They start using the same names, and someone emailed me recently and said that, hey, I was trying to use the Ranger VM001 and it was taken. And I was like, yeah, because somebody's using my videos to learn or practice, and they are probably putting the same name in. You don't have to put the same name in. I mean, I'm putting Ranger Vault here. You can put XYZ Vault 1 or whatever you really want to name it there. And you know, there's no, and even if somebody took that name, that's fine. Just put XYZ at the end, and you'll have a new one. Obviously, if you're doing in production, use a name which will be more suitable for your environment, of course. But yeah, it doesn't matter really. So just a thought, because somebody emailed and said, hey, I couldn't use that name, and I didn't know how to move forward. Well, just use any name or just add any digits or anything random something after that, and it should work. Okay, so just an FYI. So okay, we are ready to create the vault. As you can see, that's all is required to get started, and we'll wait a little bit for this. It shouldn't take too long for this vault to be created, but I'll show you some properties once this is created. All right, it looks about done. Let's hit refresh here. As you can see, Ranger Vault 1 has been created in the Ranger RG001 resource group in East US 2. So let's go ahead and click on this and get into some properties. I want to show you something very interesting, because you need to put that in as soon as possible. So there are a bunch of, once you open up this blade, there's a bunch of properties here. The thing that we want to really go to is, let's go to the properties here. This is just a very basic property. There's one thing I want to go over here is backup infrastructure, and in backup configuration. I want to show you that when this vault was created, by default, it took a geo-redundant. If you remember, we had two different resilient solutions. One was locally redundant, or geo-redundant, means how the data in the vault will be stored. Geo-redundant is great, because what will happen is all the backup data that you have over here, it's just like data store, like our previous sessions where I mentioned. Geo-redundant means you can have some data in one data center in Azure. It will do the replication of data to another data center in the backend for you. Obviously, it's a little more costlier than the locally redundant. So if you think this is your secondary solution, Azure backup, or it's complementing whatever you have on premises, maybe locally redundant is more than fine. But if your Azure backup services is your primary services, I would say go geo redundant. So that way you have a backup copy for whatever resilient reasons you need, right? So this is something you come to the backup infrastructure and set that up for your vault over here. Okay, so there are a lot of options over here which you don't need. What we are going to do is just a regular backup. So I do have, let's say, this is my desktop, right? I mean, this is where we are running, or this is at least um, this is this is actually a VM that you're looking at right now. This is the VM I use to show you guys all the demonstrations and everything from. And this is on premises. This is totally on premises. It's not in Azure. So I'm going to show you how you can use Azure Backup to uh, go ahead and back up stuff from your on-premise virtual machine. This is a real life scenario. Most likely you'll be doing something like this at work or for your lab, but this is like a very nice demonstration. So the way you will do that is first you need to go and create the backup type, right? So let's go getting started. We are not going to do site recovery. We're just doing a backup. And it's asking, what is your backup goal? So where is your workload running? Let's say my workload is running on premises in my scenario, right? In my scenario, it's basically an on-premise virtual machine. Now it's going to ask that what do you want to back up? As you can see on premises, the options increase over here. I can do applications, I can do Hyper-V virtual machines, which is great. And this is all through the backup agent. If I was just in Azure, you can see it's just a virtual machine, which is fine. So on premises, what I'm trying to say is that I'm going to do a files and folders. I have a folder on my local machine on premises, which I want to back up. Great. That's all I need. It's just a way to actually get the agent, right? So now it's telling that you need to install that agent, which is the Mars agent, or it's called just the Azure Backup Agent. So let's go ahead and first do that. So I'm going to download the agent for Windows Server or Windows Client. This is Windows 10, by the way. I've upgraded it. I don't know if anybody had the keen eyes to note I was on Windows 8.1, but now it's on Windows 10. So it's a client, right? So this will do it for Windows Client or Windows Server, both. So I'm going to go download this agent. As you can see, the agent is called the Mars Agent Installer, which is Microsoft Azure Recovery Services Agent Installer that we have been talking about. It's 36 megs and it's fine. The other thing we are going to do, okay, so before we do that, the other thing we want to do is that you need to download the Vault credentials. If you recall, we talked about Vault credentials. It's basically just a certificate that is generated for you when you create this, click on this download. It's just a private key. So what it does is that it creates the connection between this agent and Azure and registers that agent, right? And you need the key because you should not be able to just go and store it anywhere on Azure or any subscription. So it has all that information, and I'll show you that in a bit. So let's go ahead and click on download. Takes a little bit of time to, I suppose, just get the Vault credentials. So it's downloaded over here as well. So this is the folder. It basically downloaded these two things too. So this is the Vault credentials. So let's go ahead and start first the installer. So I'll go run this and this is all happening on my local virtual machine, okay? So this is the server I was doing demonstration from. And let's go ahead and install that. It's a very simple installation, as you can see. Not a big deal. And guys, this is real life scenario here. I mean, this client machine or a server, whatever it is, it's on premises right now. And I'm using this agent to connect to Microsoft Azure Backup, which is on the cloud, obviously, and do the backup. So once this once this installation is done, it says that it was successfully, you can proceed to registration. This whole registration means taking this agent and registering it to the vault through the vault, through the vault credentials, right? If you hit close here by mistake, not a big deal. It's called Azure Backup. Let me do this, Azure Backup. So it's a desktop app that got installed. It's called Microsoft Azure Backup. You can do the registration from there as well after you click on it. But I'll say proceed to registration right from the installation because I'm lazy. All it's asking is the vault credentials. It's basically telling that, hey, you are the agent and you are the Azure Mars agent. So how are you going to connect to the vault? And what we are going to say is that we are going to use this vault credential files, which is located in this folder over here. So let's go there. So I'm going to go to that folder. I'm saying that use this vault credentials that we downloaded from the portal. So one thing about this, and I think I kind of ignored that when I was doing this, once you download that credentials, it's only good for 2 days. Okay, so if you're doing this on a different machine, just go download it again and get that from there. Because if you don't go and register this within 2 days, the credential expires. So don't think that you can keep the credential file forever and do it for all your machines, because I know some of us are really lazy and will most likely do that. So every time you want to get the credentials, go to the portal and get it rather than keeping it stored somewhere for 2 days, because this is sort of your credentials, which should be secure, or in this case, securely deleted once you're done. So let's go ahead and click open. It's validating and it's saying that, hey, I went and identified this subscription. I went and found this Ranger Vault 1 that you had created in this region. So it went and found all this identification for you. It's going to ask you for an encryption setting. It takes minimum of 16 characters. So what it basically does, it's encrypted. All the data, like I mentioned, are encrypted. So you need some sort of a passphrase to encrypt and decrypt backups from the server. So let's do this. Let's ask it to generate a passphrase. As you can see, it generated a passphrase. Or you can have a passphrase that you create and you keep it over there. So I like doing mine. So I'm going to not generate over here. I'll just have my own passphrase. Okay. It's asking a location for saving the passphrase, so you can save it somewhere locally. Uh, like it says, if you lose your passphrase, Microsoft, your data cannot be recovered. Microsoft does not have this, which is great. So yeah, let's go ahead and browse and keep it on a place somewhere. So put it over here, my PC, C drive. For now, I'll just keep it in temp. Okay. Enter a location to save the passphrase. Obviously, you need to save it somewhere more important than this. All right, it's registering this server with Microsoft Azure Backup. So it's basically now taking the server's agent, communicating and trying to do that. It's obviously saying activation did not succeed completely. Uh, okay, it's having some issues registering this. Let's try this again. Okay, it succeeded the second time. It says Microsoft Backup, Azure Backup is now available for this server. So it went and saved the passphrase at this location in the temp directory, obviously. Okay, now it's saying that before your server is backed up, you must configure the scheduled backup option. So I'll just say close over here and let's close all of this. I'm going to go to Microsoft Azure Backup. So this is a little application that will open up. And this is ready over here. So this was the same app. You could actually have registered this server from this option rather than going from the installer over there. But as you can see, this is just a brand new thing that opened up. Nothing is set up over here. It's just a Microsoft Azure backup application. So what are we trying to protect here? So let's actually go and show you what I'm trying to protect here. So I have a folder here called My Backups. Okay. Um, let's go and see over here. That's not what I want. I actually have a bunch of stuff I saved earlier when I was trying this, important files. So let's click all of this. What I want really is this too. Okay, so these are the two files that I'm going to try to back up. Important file 1 and important file 2. So yeah, This is my most important file and folder. Let's say I'm going to take this entire backup folder and back it up. So how do you do this? Let's go over here. The first thing we need to do is a schedule backup. Let's go ahead and do that. If you recall the Mars backup agent, or this agent over here, it should be only able to back up a few times a day. I believe it was 3 times. So let's try that. Getting started. Next, it's going to ask you to select items to backup. So we know the items we want to backup. From my C drive, there was a folder called My Backups. This is what I want to back up, and including these 2 files. As you can see, this is a folder and file level. So let's go click OK. There's no exclusion. Let's go next. It's asking that how often do you want to back it up? So this is what I was talking about. It will only allow you to back up 3 times a day. Okay. So what I'm going to say, and this is a limitation, obviously, I'm going to say is that backup every day. This folder, I don't know, over here. Let's do a backup at 6 o'clock. Then things kind of get busy. Right after that, I want a backup at 11 a.m. after that, and one really after that, 3 p.m. So these are the 3 times how to do it. You could have done it 1 time as well, depending on what you want to do. I'm just saying that this is your option. Okay. The next thing is it's going to ask you your retention policy. So this is where your data governance comes in, your backup governance comes in, that how long do you want to keep your weekly backups, your different backups, how long they should be available for. Over here, I'm saying that yearly retention policy is going to be about 10 years, Saturday of the last week of March. So last week of March is when your last annual backup will be created, and it will be stored that there for 10 years. So I'm going to keep the defaults, but feel free to play with this and find out what's your requirement to have over there. It's going to say, how do you want to do the initial backup policy? I mean, initial backup copy. So if you have, let's say, 5 terabytes of data to be backed up for the very first time, obviously over the network is going to be kind of hard, right? 5 terabytes is a lot of data. It will take days, hours, and it'll be hard to back it up for the very first time. So for a little data that I have, or most of you might have, automatically over the network might work out for you. If you think that you have terabytes of data and the first initial backup needs to be done in some other way, you can obviously do an offline backup. With an offline backup, there's a entire, there's an entire section which tells you how to take your data, back it up, put it in a portable drive or whatever. You can actually export, you can import that data once that data reaches Microsoft's data center, and they will take your disk drive for you and do this whole thing. There's an entire instruction on how to encrypt that, how to send that. Look into Microsoft's data export and import for offline backup or any backups, right? I mean, you can send any data to Microsoft with your portable hard drive or any media, and Microsoft will take that and put that in their storage for you. You'll obviously have to ship it. There are special instructions on how to ship it. You can do with any data. So obviously with backup, they had the same thing that, hey, if you have terabytes of data and you need the initial sync, put it in a portable, encrypt it, ship it to us, we'll hook it up, we'll do it for you. But in our case, we'll just do automatically over the network. It's asking for your confirmations, and you say yes, and you do finish. So it's now creating the backup schedule and everything else. It takes a little bit of time, but it'll tell you what it's doing. So that's it. You have successfully created a backup schedule. Let's close it. As you can see over here, it has never run, right? So let's do something interesting. Rather than waiting for 6 o'clock, I'm going to just go and say backup now. So it's saying that this will be backed up right now. And we say backup. You can see what's happening over here. It says it's taking a snapshot of the volumes, but it's actually only taking for the specific data. It does not take too long. It's only 2 files, right? So I will actually show you an entire backup as well as a restoration from here. And by the way, now this backup, it's actually taking this and putting your data on the cloud in your backup vault. Okay, so this backup is going there in case you're wondering what this backup is going. Um, if you are using the Windows backup agent or any other agent at this time, it would actually ask you, do you want to go on it, like it go to a tape library on a tape, or go to a hard drive, or go to any sort of media? This does not ask you that. And the reason behind that is that it is going to go and put it in the backup vault, right? So we are waiting for that to happen. So it's transferring data. And obviously, as you can see over here, my data was definitely not this big, but it's obviously sending some metadata and other things that's increasing the data transfer, right? If you look at my backups over here, it's really just two files. It's like 1 KB, 2 KB. So this is something I was wondering before, that where did this 22.44 megs of data got transferred? Well, it has some other data it's actually sending over there. All right, so the status is the job is completed. So that's fine. It actually tells you there's one backup that was done over here at this time, and that was it. If you leave it as it is, you close this agent or whatever, it does not matter. What will happen is that in the morning, 6 o'clock, it will take the next data. Then I think another one I had at 10 a.m. It will take it 3 times. It will go take care of all this, right? So let's do this. I'm going to mess up things a little bit here now. I'm going to go to important file over here, and I'll just have this deleted. And the second file, I'll do a oopsie over here and delete the whole thing. Okay, let's say that we messed up our data, something got corrupted, something happened. So this data right now is in the Azure backup vault, and this is my on-premises client Windows 10 box, or it could have been a Windows Server 2012 or whatever. How do I restore? So the same thing, go to Azure backup over here, and I know that at least this was backed up once, so my data should have been there. I'll just go over there and do recover data. It says that, what do you want to recover? This server? This is my service name, or this client's name, Azure PC. I'll say sure. How do you want to look for this file? I'm going to say browse for the files, because I know that I'm not going to browse a whole lot. It's actually fetching it. It was on C drive, yes. And it's now showing me all the recovery points. As you can see, it created the very first recovery point over here. It's a little bit in bold, which is Monday right now, the 20th. And I'm going to, if it had multiple recovery points, which we will have if we leave this running for the next few days, you'll see multiple recovery points. Obviously, there's no recovery points before. Okay, and this is the only available time because we only backed it up once. So I'll say, okay, get me the last recovery point over here, and it's actually letting me browse. So items to recover, this is actually in Azure Vault in the cloud right now. Look at this. So if I go over here and say my backups, because that's all I was backing up, you see these are the two files it has in the vault, because these are the only two things we backed up. I would select both of these because I know I corrupted the first one and the second one got deleted. I'll do this. It's asking, how do you want to recover? Well, do you want it in the same place? So this backup agent will restore it at the same original location. And I'll say, okay, same original location. It's now asking that, do you want copies of the both versions, or how do you want the recovery to take place? So if you want to compare what got corrupted and what not, you can actually have copies created when it's recovering in the same location. I'm going to just say that overwrite the existing version. So I don't care because I know this got corrupted, the other file got messed up. Just to view once again, this one just has important, right? Okay. So I'm going to say overwrite it. It's going to restore the access control list. So it took the permissions as well. So let's go and click on recover. So now it's going to try to recover this data. You can see over here in the original location. Keep these two side by side. Because what is going to happen, it's going to fix this data, and it's also going to, the other file, the important file too, is going to show up as well. So it's going to do some estimations right now over here, like you see, estimating size of backup items. It's doing some calculation, the back end. Just wait for it a little bit. Alrighty, as you can see that the file just appeared here. File recovery job succeeded. So let's close this and go back here. One, my second file showed up. And the other thing is that, let's see, my corrupted file got fixed. Yep, my corrupted file important text one is back. So it's really as easy as that to take your files and folders and do all this in your Azure Vault through Microsoft Azure Backup. So do remember one thing from here is that this was the backup agents, the Mars agent that did that. It obviously has its limitations. So let's close this over here. There's not a whole lot with this Azure backup through the agent that you can see over here. I'm just seeing over here my backup jobs or anything that's running right now. There's really nothing running. Backup items does not really show anything up over here. Nothing much happens from this portal, at least with whatever we had done. Backup infrastructure, production servers, should show Azure PC. So this is the only thing I could see over here through this. You go to the backup infrastructure, you go to the production servers to see which are the servers that you are backing up right now. So file and folder backup, Azure PC. This is my uh, the, the backup where I was running. It's from there. That's the only thing really you can see from here. There's nothing much you can see. Okay, so from this portal so far, that's all that is there. Alrighty, so that's all I have to demonstrate for now. I know we are almost getting to the hour. So that was it from Azure Backup, which is part of Azure Recovery Services, which is offered from Microsoft's OMS Operations Management Suite. And I mentioned you in this session about the agents, what are the limitations, what Azure Backup Vault is, what are the credentials used for, how to go and create a vault, how to have the vault be, the data be locally or geo-redundant. I showed you how to download the Mars installer or the recovery Microsoft Azure Recovery Services agent on a local computer on premises and do the backup. I showed you how to create the schedule, and I showed you how to do a manual backup with the manual restore. Well, most of your restores will be manual. It's almost redundant saying that. So I hope this was a good session for you. There's a lot more to cover with recovery services, and I mentioned a little bit for the guys who are looking for exams. This is pretty much it. I mean, that's all it shows. I mean, that's all you need from Azure backup point of view. There's a little bit more or Azure site recovery, but in the next few sessions, I'm going to go a little bit more than it's covered in your exam. I'm going to start getting into the VM backups, which is kind of part of the new curriculum right now. I'm going to show you more on how to actually do an Azure backup server to do things that your agent cannot do over here. Um, and I'm going to get more into site recovery and some demonstrations on that. So if you are looking at this video to try to gain knowledge and try to actually do a POC for your organization, it's going to be a great set of videos over here. I'm hoping that I'm not going to take too long for the next few videos. So it's going to probably all happen within the same week because everything is going to depend a little bit on the current demo. So I'm going to leave that up and running, okay? So that agent that I had up and running, I'm going to most likely have that running a little bit to give you some more information. Alrighty, there's a lot to cover. I know there's a lot to understand in here as well. Watch this video a few times if you need to, but I don't think this was really too complicated, at least for now. Um, the other thing I really want to mention is that everything that I did right now is I mean, there are possibilities of doing this, uh, from PowerShell. You can create the vault from there. You can run a schedule. You can download agents. You can do everything from PowerShell, right? So there are all commandlets for that from PowerShell as well that we did not cover, but they're there. And that's it. Anyways, guys, thanks for viewing. There's my training site, YouTube. Do like the videos. I like it when you do that. I'll try to post the slides. Join me on Twitter. Send me emails. Connect with me at LinkedIn. One little thing though, I think I'm having better response time when you ask me questions on the YouTube comments. I'm really behind on the emails, and some of the emails are really long. People asking a lot of things which are sometimes related, sometimes not related. I'm okay with that, but I feel that if you really want an answer in a hurry, the best way to do that is on the YouTube comments because I watch that more often. I'm hoping nobody is doing that, but I'm hoping other people can answer your questions as well if you're in a hurry. But definitely much better ways to get an answer is from YouTube comments. rather than sending me an email. But feel free to send me an email though. It's just that it will take me some time to get back. And I'm really telling you by some time, I mean like I'm almost a month behind with all the emails that have come in. And obviously, do not forget there are emails from work and things like that. So it takes a little bit time. Anyways, guys, thanks for viewing. And please don't forget to like the videos on YouTube. And I'll see you in the next session.